Hello everyone. My topic for discussion today is palpitations, and extremely sorry for the delay. Palpitations is an extremely common presenting complaint in the OPD. So first, what is palpitation? Palpitation can be defined as the unpleasant or undue awareness of one's own heartbeat. It is generally perceived as a fluttering, pounding, or a thumping sensation over the chest. As far as the causes are concerned, cardiac is the most common cause of palpitation, followed by psychiatric causes. And as far as the mechanism of palpitation in cardiac causes, it can occur either because of alterations in the heart rate, rhythm, or contraction. So, cause of palpitations, the causes can be broadly divided into two categories: rhythm abnormalities and non-rhythm structural abnormalities. First is rhythm abnormalities can occur commonly because of premature atrial or ventricular contractions, supraventricular tachycardia, ventricular arrhythmias, atrial fibrillations, flutter, bradyarrhythmias, as well as heart blocks. Non-rhythm structural abnormalities, it can occur with any cause. It can occur due to CAD, hypertension, mitral valve prolapse syndrome, rheumatic fever, conditions causing left ventricular outflow tract obstruction like aortic stenosis, HOCM, aortic regurgitation, or even atrial myxoma. Other conditions which are associated with palpitations are high output states like anemia, thyrotoxicosis, wet beriberi, Paget's disease, and physiological palpitations which occur during pregnancy, fever, or exercise, and conditions which are associated with increased sympathetic activity like hypoglycemia, hypotension, hypothermia, pheochromocytoma, thyrotoxicosis, systemic mastocytosis, and conditions which are associated with increased parasympathetic activity. These can in turn cause palpitations, like following a vasovagal attack in emotional states, or any GI disturbances. Even simple GI disturbances like bloating or nausea vomiting can also cause palpitations. And such palpitations can easily be terminated by change in position. As far as the drugs causing palpitations, it can occur because of alcohol. Both alcohol abuse as well as alcohol withdrawal or any other psychedelic substance withdrawal can lead to palpitations. Other substances are caffeine, sympathomimetics, anticholinergics, and vasodilators can cause palpitation according to Mary's law. So, whenever there is a peripheral vasodilation, there's going to be a reflex increase in heart rate, and that can lead to palpitation. Thyroxine, steroids, and tricyclic antidepressants are going to inhibit the reuptake of serotonin, norepinephrine, other sympathetic substances, and thus they can cause palpitations as well. The psychiatric causes causing palpitations can occur because of panic attack, panic disorders, generalized anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, conversion disorders, and somatization disorders. So, how to identify if the patient is having a palpitation because of a cardiac disorder or a psychiatric disorder? A patient with psychiatric disorder is going to have more symptoms and signs, and such palpitations will generally be associated with so many other psychiatric problems, and they'll generally tend to persist for a longer time. So, if a psychiatric cause is causing palpitation, the treatment would be anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications like benzodiazepines. And since it is due to generalized sympathetic overactivity, we can go for a non-selective beta blocker like propranolol. So, how to approach a patient with palpitation? So, first and foremost, just like any other case, we need to identify if the patient is hemodynamically stable or not. Second, we need to ask what other associated symptoms the patient is having. Suppose if the patient is having an underlying dyspnea, hypotension, or syncope, indicates that the patient is having a serious form of palpitation, which is probably associated with the CAD or MI, or it is probably a serious form of arrhythmia like very decompensated SVT or a VT. Other associated symptoms can be in the form of thyrotoxicosis. Suppose if a patient is having palpitations along with any alopecia, diarrhea, with the goitogenous swelling in the neck, it can probably indicate the patient is having palpitations secondary to thyrotoxicosis. So we need to ask other associated symptoms. And the most important thing is we need to ask how the patient perceives the palpitation as. The way the patient describes the palpitation actually can serve as a prelude to how the ECG is going to look like. Suppose if the patient is going to say he is having a regular palpitation, then the diagnosis is probably going to be a sinus tachycardia, SVT, or a VT. Suppose if the patient says he is having an irregular palpitation, then it could be an atrial fibrillation. And then we can ask what is the trigger or what led to the onset of the palpitation, how it is proceeding, and how it is getting ending. A sudden, generally paroxysmal or sudden onset of palpitation is seen in conditions like SVT and VT. Whereas if it is due to sinus tachycardia, the onset as well as the termination will be more gradual. And we can ask how frequently the patient is getting the symptoms, so that we can decide whether the patient needs to be treated or not, because since most palpitations are generally benign. And we need to ask for other associated comorbids in the patient. So as far as other associated symptoms are concerned, as I already said, a more paroxysmal sudden onset of palpitations, which can undergo spontaneous termination, or which can undergo spontaneous termination with a vagal maneuver, probably indicates that the patient is having an SVT. Suppose if the patient is having an associated dyspnea or syncope, it indicates that the patient is having VT. Suppose if the palpitations are irregular, then it can be because of atrial fibrillation. Palpitations associated with SVT are generally associated with polyuria, because SVT is associated with increased atrial activity, which can in turn lead to atrial stretching, and that can stimulate atrial natriuretic peptide, and that can lead to polyuria. So how do we work up a patient who is having palpitations? The workup is generally simple. We can ask the history for the patient, and we can generally ask the patient to map out the palpitations that he's having, as to what rate or rhythm they are having. We can go for an ECG. We can go for an echo to look for any structural abnormalities. We can go for thyroid profile, and we can look for any electrolyte abnormalities which is causing the palpitations. Suppose if the patient is coming to the OPD claiming palpitations, but every time he comes for the office visit, CCG is normal, or if the patient is complaining of palpitations at night, we need to go for a more extensive or 24 hours monitoring. This can be done with the help of 24 hours Holter monitoring, implantable Roop recorder, whereby an external device can be placed over the surface of the heart, and whenever the patient is perceiving a palpitation, he can switch on the recorded, and the patient can visualize it later. Or we can also go for a mobile outpatient telemetry monitoring. Since the topic of palpitation is incomplete without discussing arrhythmia, we shall now discuss some of the basic arrhythmias and how to treat them. So now this is a case. A 22-year-old male came to the hospital with complaints of sudden onset of flip-flop sensation over the chest, which is lasting for a few seconds, associated with spontaneous recovery. He has no comorbids and his vitals are stable. So if we go for a CCG, this is going to be CCG. So if we carefully look at the CCG, it seemingly seems normal. There are normal QRS complexes, but if we notice carefully, there is one QRS complex which is abnormal. This QRS complex is not preceded by a P wave. This QRS complex is also extremely wide, and the QRS and the T are discordant to each other. So this probably, if you look more carefully, these QRS complexes are not identical to each other. Some of the QRS complexes are different. So this probably is an ECG for a patient who is having a premature ventricular contraction. Premature ventricular contraction is an extremely common cause for palpitation. It can occur even in normal individuals. It can occur even in young athletes and other people. It can occur even during rest or at sleep. Normally, it need not be treated. Suppose if a patient is complaining of recurrent premature ventricular contraction, we need to rule out causes like hyperthyroidism, electrolyte abnormalities, and other structural cardiac causes. So, how is the ECG for a patient with a premature ventricular contraction going to look like? Okay, so normally, if you, if you generally consider the impulse generation in the heart, they say SA node is going to give rise to the impulses. It is going to travel via the AV node, travel via the bundle office. It is going to go across the two branches, and then from the Purkinje system, it is going to travel across the heart. Only if this normal conduction pathway is going to be formed out, the ECG and the QRS complex is going to look normal. If there's any aberrancy in any of this pathway, the ECG is going to look abnormal. Since the premature ventricular complex is actually going to originate from the muscles of the ventricle, this is not conducted across a normal pathway. Therefore, the ECG is going to look abnormal, and since the conduction across ventricular muscle is much slower compared to conduction in a Purkinje fiber, the QRS complex is going to be wide. So, since it did not originate from the SA node, a P wave is going to be absent. And since it is abnormally conducted across the ventricle, the QRS complex is going to be wide, abnormal, and discordant. Since the depolarization and depolarization are not occurring in the same direction. And then, how do we differentiate a premature atrial complex from a premature ventricular complex? Is that a premature ventricle complex is going to be is going to be having a fully compensatory pause following the premature contraction. And then, why does the patient actually perceive palpitation because of this? It is because of post extrasystolic potentiation. So, following a premature ventricular contraction, there is going to be a huge pause. During this pause, there is a systole which is not occurring. Therefore, the blood which was not ejected out is going to accumulate in the heart. This in turn is going to stretch the ventricle and increase the length of the muscle fiber. And according to Frank-Stallings law, it is going to increase the rate of contraction, leading to much greater ejection. And this is actually perceived as a post extrasystolic potentiation, and that is perceived as a flip-flop sensation over the heart. Generally, for a post premature ventricular contraction, as I already said, it's a very benign entity. Generally, no treatment is required. But suppose if the patient is having a recurrent premature ventricular contraction, or the patient is extremely symptomatic, or if we go for a 24-hour monitoring, if this premature ventricular contraction is actually going to comprise 10% of the entire heartbeat, and is thus causing cardiomyopathy, we can treat with the help of beta blockers, non-dihydropiridine calcium channel blockers. Suppose if it is still persisting, we can go for catheter ablation of the abnormal circuit which is actually causing this premature ventricular contraction. Suppose if a single premature ventricular contraction is followed by a normal beat, followed by another single premature ventricular contraction, it is called as a ventricular bigeminy. Suppose if every third beat is a normal sinus beat, then we can call it a ventricular trigeminy. Suppose if three premature ventricular complex occur together simultaneously, then it is called as a ventricular tachycardia. And if that persists for more than 30 seconds, it is called as a sustained ventricular tachycardia. So now this is another case. A 40-year-old female who is a known case of RHD came to the hospital with complaints of palpitations, dyspnea of sudden onset lasting for 30 minutes. On examination, her heart rate was 110 beats per minute. She is having a variable S1, and RS is showing bibasal fine crisp, and the pulse rate is around 92 beats per minute, which is irregularly irregular. So this is actually a very seemingly easy case. It clearly points out that the patient is actually having AF. So she is probably a case of RHD having MS, and that MS has led to an AF, which is now decompensated the heart, descending in a pulmonary edema, which is why she is having the bibasal crisp. So her heart rate is around 110 and her pulse rate is 92. So she is having an apex beat deficit, and because of AF, she is having a regularly irregular pulse, and there is a variable S1. So this is her ECG. So here, no well-defined P waves can be made out. The P waves appear very fibrillatory, or these are called as fibrillatory waves, and the RR intervals are also irregular. So how do we calculate the heart rate or the ventricular rate in a patient having AF or an irregular RR interval? Is that we need to count the total number of QRS complexes in a 6-second interval, which amounts to about 30 large boxes. And while counting, we should always leave out the first QRS complex. So before we move on to AF, we need to know what a normal sinus rhythm is like. The direction or the vector of the P wave is that it is along the direction of about 45 to 60 degree. So if a patient is having an impulse which is originating from the sinus node, P wave should definitely be upright in lead 1, 2 and A wave, because they are in the direction of along 45 to 60 degree, and it should also be upright in leads V3 to V6. Since it is since the SA node is located in the right atrium and the impulse is going away from the right atrium, the P wave should be inverted in AVR. This P wave should be preceding every QRS complex, and the PP-PR interval and the RR interval should be constant. And the PR interval should constantly be more than 0.12 seconds. Suppose if the PR interval is less, it means that the impulse is not conducted across the AV node and there is some other bypass trackway which is having a faster conduction that is actually conducting the impulse. So all of these conditions should be satisfied to tell that the patient is having normal sinus rhythm. Even if one of them is not satisfied, then we cannot be calling the ECG as having a normal sinus rhythm. So what is an atrial fibrillation? Uh, the atrial fibrillation is nothing but the presence of irregular, disorganized atrial activity in the form of fibrillatory waves. Suppose if the ECG is not showing fibrillatory waves, it is only showing a flat line with irregular RR intervals, still we can consider that the patient is having an atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is actually generally because of a structurally abnormal atrium, which is having so many reentrant circuits within the atria itself. Sometimes this enhanced automaticity can also be located within the pulmonary veins. In an atrial fibrillation, the atrial rate is generally more than about 350 beats per minute. And the ventricular rate is going to be irregularly irregular with narrow QRS complexes. Since although the impulse is actually originating from an abnormal foci within the atrium, it is traveling via the normal AV node to reach the ventricle. Therefore, the QRS complex is generally going to be only narrow. Atrial fibrillation is normally associated with CAD, hypothyroidism, cardiomyopathy, valvular heart disease, especially MS and MR, COPD, pericarditis, and hypertension. Atrial fibrillation is also common following alcohol abuse as well as alcohol withdrawal. And if it is associated with alcohol abuse, it is called as holiday heart syndrome. So, what is the classification of atrial fibrillation? Atrial fibrillation can be classified as valvular AF if it is associated with rheumatic mitral stenosis. Only rheumatic mitral stenosis is said to be associated or is said to be called as having valvular AF. Or if it is associated with prosthetic valve or any valve repair procedure. If it is not associated with any valve related condition, then it is called as a non-valvular AF. A lone AF is a condition whereby a patient is having AF whose age is less than 60 years and he is not having any clinical or echocardiographic evidence of any cardiac or lung pathology. Paroxysmal AF is one which has an abrupt onset with an abrupt termination within 7 days, but most commonly it will terminate by itself within 2 hours. Suppose if there is no termination and if this atrial fibrillation is persisting for more than 7 days, then it is called as a persistent AF. An AF which is refractory to any form of therapy and it is persisting for over a year is called as a permanent AF. Before we go on to the treatment of AF, it is very important to identify whether the patient has having an AF associated with WPW syndrome because the treatment can become extremely detrimental if you don't identify this. WPW syndrome, as we all know, it is because of an aberrant accessory pathway which is connecting the atria to the ventricle. If you're going to analyze the ECG of a patient who's having AF along with WPW syndrome, as usual, the fibrillatory waves and the irregular RI intervals are going to be present. But since the impulse from the atria to the ventricle can travel via both the AV node as well as through this abnormal pathway, some of the impulses will travel via this normal AV node and they are going to have a narrow QRS complex. And some of the impulses are going to travel via this aberrant pathway and they are going to have a wide QRS complex. So the QRS complexes will be of varying morphologies and varying rate. The significance is that if the impulse is normally traveling across the AV node, since the AV node, as we all know, is generally going to delay the impulses, the ventricular rate is going to be generally low. Suppose if we give AV nodal blocking agents in a patient who is having WPW syndrome, all the impulse will travel via the aberrant pathway, which can extremely increase the ventricular rate and it can even lead to ventricular fibrillation and ventricular death. A sudden death. Therefore, AV nodal blocking agents are absolutely contraindicated in an AF patient with WPW syndrome. The cornerstone for the treatment of AF involves rate control, rhythm control, and anticoagulation. The general dictum is that we should go for rate control in all patients and rhythm control only in selected patients. But now recent studies have proved that rhythm control has no serious advantages over rate control, and the risk of developing stroke is still the same. And then a very important factor is anticoagulation in order to prevent the incidence of stroke, because atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter are the two most common arrhythmias which are associated with increased risk of cardioembolic events. So how do we go for rate control in a patient with AF? Before we go for the management, first we need to identify if the patient is having a normal systolic dysfunction or a preserved EF, or if he is having a reduced EF. So if the patient is having a preserved EF, we can safely go for beta blockers and calcium channel blockers. The preferred calcium channel blocker is diltiazem. The dose is 0.25 milligram per kg, slow IV over 2 minutes. 10 minutes later, we can give another dose of 0.35 mg kV per kg IV, but this dose needs to be given much slower than the previous dose, because it has more propensity to cause hypotension. And after, if the rate is controlled, we can go for a maintenance dose of 5 to 15 mg per hour. The onset of action of diltiazem is about 5 to 10 minutes, and the duration will last for about 3 to 4 hours. And then if diltiazem is not available, we can go for verapamil. And the dose of verapamil is 0.075 to 0.15 mg per kg, again slow IV over 2 minutes. But verapamil has even more tendency, and it's even more long acting compared to diltiazem. Therefore, suppose if there is no other drug available, and if the patient is having a reduced EF, and we need to choose between diltiazem and verapamil, we can actually prefer diltiazem over verapamil. The advantage of verapamil is that maintenance dose is not needed, and the duration of action is much longer acting compared to diltiazem. It is about 4 to 12 hours. And for verapamil, we can go for oral maintenance dose in the form of 120 to 320 milligram daily in 3 divided doses. Usually, it is given in the form of TDS dosing. And then the third drug is metoprolol. Metoprolol we can give in the dose of 2.5 to 5 mg slow IV over 2 minutes, and it can be repeated once in every 5 minutes to a maximum of 15 milligram in 15 minutes. And oral maintenance dose is about 25 to 100 milligram BD. Suppose if the patient is having a reduced ejection fraction, the only drug we can, or perhaps we can go for one more drug. The main drug which we can go for rate control is actually digoxin. The second drug which we can go for is amiodarone, but amiodarone is generally more preferred in ventricular arrhythmias than atrial arrhythmias. So for rhythm control, before we analyze the patient, before we analyze if the patient is eligible for rhythm control or not, we need to know the time of onset of AF. Suppose if an AF is lasting for less than 48 hours, then we can go for rhythm control in that patient. Suppose if an AF is persisting for more than 48 hours, there is a chance that the patient has already developed an emboli, and if we suddenly convert the rhythm to normal, that emboli can easily travel across and can result in various cardioembolic manifestations. So if the patient is having an AF with onset of less than 48 hours, we can go for an electrical cardioversion. But following an electrical cardioversion, there will still be an entity called as electromechanical dissociation, whereby we would have converted the rhythm to normal, but still the atria will be mechanically weak. Therefore, following an electrical cardioversion, anticoagulation should be given up to 4 weeks. Suppose if we are planning for elective cardioversion, prior anticoagulation should be given for up to 3 weeks, following which elective cardioversion can be done. Suppose if the patient has crossed more than 48 hours, or if you are not sure about the time of onset of AF, we can go for pharmacological rate control with the help of class 1A, 1C, and class 3 agents like flecainide, propafenone, ibutilide, dofetilide, and amiodarone. But after 7 days of onset of AF, generally rhythm control has no role in controlling the AF to sinus rhythm. So the third most important part in treating a patient with AF is anticoagulation. So as far as anticoagulation is concerned, a patient with valvular AF has more risk for developing cardioembolic events compared to a non-valvular AF or a lone AF. So all cases of valvular AF should be started on oral anticoagulation, either with warfarin or with direct oral antithrombin inhibitors. And the target INR which we can aim is about 2 to 3. Suppose if the patient is having a mechanical valve, then the target INR increases to about 2.5 to 3.5. If the patient is having a non-valvular AF, then we can go for a CHAD S2 score. And the criteria is that uh, congestive cardiac failure, which carries a score of 1, hypertension carries a score of 1, age more than 75 years, which carries a score of 2, diabetes mellitus, which carries a score of 1, previous history of stroke or any thromboembolic event carries a score of 2, any peripheral vascular disease carries a score of 1, age between 65 to 75 years carries a score of 1, and female sex will automatically put the patient and will automatically give the patient a score of 1. So the total maximum score is 9. Suppose if the patient is having a score of 0, then generally no treatment or anticoagulation is needed. Suppose if the patient is having a score of 1, then either aspirin can be given or we can still initiate oral anticoagulation. But if the score is more than 2, then definitely oral anticoagulation should be initiated and the target INR is 2 to 3. A patient with a lone AF is at the least propensity to develop or is at the least risk of developing a cardioembolic event. Therefore, for such patient, either no treatment is required or we can go for aspirin in the dose of 81 to 325 milligram as a prophylaxis. Okay, now we shall go for a third case now. A 30-year-old female came to the hospital with sudden onset of rapid palpitation with onset 15 minutes ago. She has no known comorbids and there are no previous episodes on examination. Her heart rate was 172 beats per minute, her pulse rate was regular and her JVP was elevated. So now if we go for an ECG, this is how the ECG looks like. So this straight away we can say that the patient is having a narrow QRS complex tachycardia. But we are not able to make out any P wave here and there are only QRST complexes. So how do we approach a patient who is having a narrow QRS complex tachycardia? So any tachyarrhythmia can be divided based on the QRS complex broadly into narrow QRS complex tachycardia and wide QRS complex tachycardia. So if the patient is having a narrow QRS complex tachycardia, we should look at the RR intervals to see if they are regular or irregular. If the RR interval is irregular, there are only two causes. I mean, mainly two causes, which is multifocal atrial tachycardia and atrial fibrillation. Multifocal atrial tachycardia is whereby multiple arrhythmogenic foci are arising from the atria itself. And then we've discussed atrial fibrillation already. Or it could still be an atrial flutter with a variable block. Suppose if the patient is having a regular RR interval, we should see if the P waves are present or absent. So as I said already, for P wave should be present, it should be a normal sinus rhythm. And for a P wave, morphology should be normal, it should arise from the SA node itself. Suppose if a P wave is present in a patient who is having a regular RR interval, it means the impulse is originating from above. So, uh, so it can either be a sinus tachycardia, focal atrial tachycardia, AVRT, AVNRT, sinoatrial reentrant tachycardia, or intraatrial reentrant tachycardia. Suppose if the P waves are absent, the most common diagnosis is actually AVNRT or it could be a junctional tachycardia. So once you've seen whether P waves are present or absent, if P waves are present, we need to see if the P waves are upright in lead to or if the P waves are retrograde. If the P waves are upright in lead to, it means that the impulse is originating from the direction of impulse travel is from the atria to the ventricle. Therefore, the impulse is either originating in the form of a sinus tachycardia, a focal atrial tachycardia, or a sinoatrial reentrant tachycardia, where there is a reentry circuit which is established between the sinus node and the atrium. Suppose if the P waves are retrograde in lead to, it means that the impulse is traveling to the atria from the ventricle, that is from below upwards. Therefore, the P wave will be inverted in the inferior lead side 2-3 AVF. So if the P waves are inverted, we need to see if the P wave is present in front of the QRS complex or it is present after the QRS complex. So if the P wave is present in front of the QRS complex, the causes are focal atrial tachycardia, junctional tachycardia, atypical AVNRT, atypical AVRT, and atrial flutter with 2S block. Suppose if the P waves are present after the QRS complex, then the common diagnoses are AVRT, AVNRT, and junctional tachycardia. So these are the common types of supraventricular tachycardia. There are basically three major mechanisms which can trigger a supraventricular tachycardia. One is re-entry is the most common mechanism which occurs in about 90% of the cases. The second most common mechanism is enhanced automaticity, and the third common reason is triggered activity. So since re-entry is the most common mechanism, the common mechanisms or the common arrhythmias which come under re-entrant tachycardia are AVNRT, AVRT, intra-atrial re-entry tachycardia, and sinoatrial re-entry tachycardia. Under enhanced automaticity, this enhanced automatic foci can arise either from the atria or it can arise from the junction. So if it is arising from the atria, if it is arising from a single foci, it can be a unifocal atrial tachycardia. And if it is arising from multiple foci within the atria, it can be a multifocal atrial tachycardia. If the impulse is originating from the junction, it can be a paroxysmal junctional tachycardia or a non-paroxysmal junctional tachycardia. In such supraventricular tachycardia, the atrial rate is generally around 200 to 250 beats per minute. The other narrow complex tachycardia are atrial flutter and atrial fibrillation. In atrial flutter, the atrial rate generally lies between 250 to 350, and in atrial fibrillation, the atrial rate can vary between around 350 to 450. So why does this re-entry mechanism actually occur? Even in normal individuals, there are two pathways within the AV node. Among these two pathways, there is one pathway or the fast pathway. This fast pathway has a very longer refractory period, and there is a slow pathway which has a much shorter refractory period. So normally, if an impulse is going to come, it generally travels via the faster pathway and it is going to reach the ventricles. Suppose if the patient has a premature atrial complex, which is perfectly timed such that this faster pathway is in the refractory period. Now, since the faster pathway is in the refractory period, the impulse is now going to travel via the slower pathway. So by the time this impulse reaches the end of the slower pathway, the faster pathway would have recovered from its refractory period. So now the impulse can travel both downwards towards the ventricle as well as it can travel upwards and retrograde through the atria, simultaneously activating both the atria as well as the ventricle. So if this is how the impulse travels, that is, if the impulse is traveling from the atria to the ventricle via the slow pathway in an antegrade direction, and if the impulse is traveling from the ventricle to the atria in a retrograde direction via the fast pathway, this is called as a typical AVRT or the slow fast circuit. And this is the most common mechanism of AVRT in about 90% of the individuals. Suppose if the reverse is going to occur, that is a fast slow circuit whereby the impulse is going to travel from the atria to the ventricle in an antegrade pathway, and it is going to travel back from the ventricle to the atria in a retrograde fashion. It is called as an atypical AVRT or a fast slow circuit, and this can occur in about 10% of the individuals. And the cause, since as we already saw, a typical AVNRT is because of a premature atrial complex. An atypical AVNRT is because of a premature ventricular complex. So what are the common ways in which an ECG for a patient with AVNRT is going to look like? In about 66% of the cases, since the atria and the ventricle are simultaneously activated, the P wave will be lying within the QRS complex such that it cannot be distinctively made out. Therefore, all that we'll be able to see is only a QRST and a QRST complex, and P waves will not generally be seen. Suppose if there is a dysynchrony in the activation between the atria and the ventricle, the atria can sometimes be activated after the QRS complex, and you'll be falling on the S wave of the QRS complex, and that is called as a pseudo S wave, and this can occur in about 30% of the cases. Sometimes the atria can be activated prior to the ventricle and will be lying just in front of the QRS complex as a Q wave, and that pseudo Q wave is present in about 4% of the individuals. Sometimes it can occur much later. It can occur much later beyond the activation of the ventricle, and it can the P wave can distort the ST segment, and this is generally extremely rare. Suppose if the patient is having an atypical AVNRT, the P wave will be present in front of the QRS complex. Generally, greater the distance between the P wave and the QRS complex, it is more likely that the arrhythmia is AVRT than AVNRT. So once that we've diagnosed that the patient is having a supraventricular tachycardia, uh, the first thing which we can go to terminate is that we can go for a vagal stimulation. As I already explained, there are three major mechanisms causing a PSVT. One is re-entry, other one is enhanced automaticity, and the third one is triggered arrhythmia. Only re-entry will respond to vagal maneuvers. Both enhanced automaticity as well as triggered arrhythmias, which generally occurs due to electrolyte imbalance and digitoris toxicity, will not respond to vagal stimulation. So, what are the ways by which we can terminate or by which we can mechanically terminate PSVTR? We can go for a carotid sinus massage. Carotid sinus massage is generally done at the bifurcation of the internal carotid artery at the level of the angle of mandible. We can there's no need to massage, we'll just have to gently palpate or press over the artery, and both sides should not be simultaneously pressed. And second thing is we can go for a Valsalva maneuver. There are various ways by which we can perform Valsalva maneuver, but the easiest ways to do is that we can ask the patient to strain by asking him to lift any heavy object, or we can ask the patient to blow through a 10 ml syringe. And after the patient performs a Valsalva maneuver, we can ask the patient to lie supine and raise the leg in order to improve the efficacy of the Valsalva maneuver. Then we can go for pharyngeal stimulation by instilling a gag reflex. We can ask the patient to do a forceful coughing, and diving reflexes. We can submerge the face of the patient in cold water, which will in turn stimulate the vagus, and this vagal stimulation will in turn block the AV node, and this AV nodal blocking will prevent the atrial impulses from reaching the ventricle, and thus it can control the ventricular rate. Suppose if all these maneuvers are ineffective in terminating, then we can go for pharmacological termination with the help of adenosine. How do we generally give adenosine is that adenosine is an extremely short-acting drug. The duration of action of adenosine is only about 10 to 20 seconds. So we should in order to give adenosine, we should try to find a vein which is as central to the heart as possible, preferably the EJV or the cubital vein. Suppose if you are going for a central vein, then only half the dose of what is prescribed should be given. So if you're going for a peripheral vein, adenosine about 6 milligram IV should be given rapidly, and this should be followed by a 20 ml saline follow through, and immediately we should lift the limb in order to increase its delivery to the heart. So immediately after 10 seconds, we can see if the heart rate is reduced or not. Suppose if it is not reduced, we can go for a 12 milligram dose, and still if there is no response, for a third and final time, we can give for another 12 milligram dose. And mostly in about 90% of the cases, the PSVT would have reverted. But the major contraindication to adenosine is that it can lead to bronchospasm. Therefore, it is contraindicated in patients with COPD and asthma. And it can also increase the risk of atrial and ventricular arrhythmias. Therefore, we should never give adenosine without cardiac monitoring. Suppose if the patient is not responding to adenosine or is having any contraindication to adenosine, we can go for beta blockers, non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers, and digoxin, and the dose is same as that of AF. As far as the treatment of any arrhythmia is concerned, even before we make a diagnosis of any arrhythmia, any patient who is hemodynamically unstable, the first treatment that we actually do is electrical cardioversion. If the patient is hemodynamically unstable, then we can go for an ECG, evaluate, and give the corresponding treatment. So even for a patient with PSVT, if he's initially hemodynamic unstable, the first treatment that we should go for is electrical cardioversion. Suppose if a patient is having a recurrent PSVT, we can ablate the circuit with the help of a catheter ablation. Now for the last and the final discussion. This is a 60-year-old male who is a known case of diabetic hypertensive and a CAD or ischemic heart disease who came to the zero delay with rapid onset of palpitations and giddiness. His pulse rate was about 180 beats per minute and his BP was 90/60. And now if we look at his ECG, we are seeing that he is having a white QRS complex tachycardia. So how do we generally approach a patient who is having a white QRS complex tachycardia? White complex tachycardia generally has only two DDs. One is a ventricular tachycardia, or it could be an SVT with either a pre-existing bundle branch block, or it could be an SVT secondary to an antidromic AVRT. Before we move on to Brugada's criteria, we'll see what are the features which will favor ventricular tachycardia. Suppose if the QRS complex is unusually wide, more than 0.14 seconds, it probably indicates that the patient is having VT. Even with an SVT with a block, the QRS complex is going to be prolonged, but it will generally be less than 0.14 seconds. The presence of complete AV dissociation, presence of ventricular fusion beat, presence of a sinus captured beat or a Dessler's beat, presence of ventricular atrial conduction with block, presence of concordant QRS complexes which are either positively concordant or negatively concordant, an RBB morphology with the left axis deviation, or a left bundle branch morphology with a right axis deviation, or the presence of northwest axis actually indicate that the patient is more likely to have a ventricular tachycardia. Why is the patient having a complete AV dissociation is that the atria is beating on its own from its normal sinus rhythm, and the ventricular tachycardia is because of an abnormal foci which is originating from the ventricle, and the ventricle is beating on its own rhythm. Therefore, the atria and the ventricle will not be related to each other, and there is going to be an atricular ventricular dissociation. What is ventricular fusion complex is that sometimes there could be two foci which are originating from the ventricle itself, and both these foci can, or sometimes a foci could originate from the supraventricular origin, and another foci can come from below the bundle office or from the ventricle, and both these complex can together combine and produce a ventricular fusion complex. Normally there is AV dissociation, but if at all a sinus beat is successfully getting conducted across the AV node and is traveling via the normal pathway to reach the ventricle, a normal sinus beat can be obtained of narrow QRS complex. That is called as a synoid captured beat. Clinically, how can we identify whether the patient is having a VT or SVT is that a patient who is having VT will be more hemodynamically unstable compared to a patient with SVT. Prior history of CAD or any ischemic heart disease or any other structural heart disease generally favors VT more than SVT because supraventricular tachycardia occurs in patient who is having a structurally normal heart. The presence of varying S1, varying pulse volume, and Canon A waves in the neck are all due to AV dissociation. So if a patient is having a white QRS complex tachycardia, in order to identify if it is whether VT or SVT, we go for a modified Brugada's criteria. So the first thing we should look for is that we should look if there is any RS complex in any of the precordial leads. Suppose if not a single RS complex is found, then and there the diagnosis becomes VT. Suppose even if a single RS complex is present, we should look for the duration of the RS complex. And the duration is generally measured from the onset of the R wave to the deepest point or the nadir of the S wave. And if this duration of the widest RS complex is more than 100 milliseconds, then the diagnosis becomes VT. Suppose if the duration of this RS complex is less than 100 milliseconds, we should see if the patient is having an AV dissociation or not. The presence of an AV dissociation points out that the patient is having VT. Suppose still we are not able to make out, we can see if the patient is having a right bundle branch block morphology or a left bundle branch block morphology. Right bundle branch morphology is that if the right bundle branch is going to be blocked, the impulse should travel from the left bundle branch to the right bundle branch. Therefore, the left-sided leads will show a slurred terminal negativity and the right-sided lead will show a positivity. So, if V1 is showing this is how the morphology is going to look like. So for V1, which is the right-sided lead, is going to show positive morphology in the form of either monophasic or biphasic pattern like R or RR pattern. And the V6 is going to show a slurred terminal negativity in the form of a QS complex. Then it can favor VT. So what is the left bundle branch block morphology? Suppose if the left bundle branch is blocked, the impulse is going to travel from the right bundle to the left bundle. Therefore, the right-sided leads will show negativity and the left-sided leads will show positivity. So, if the patient is having a right bundle branch block or a left bundle branch morphology, which is either monophasic or biphasic, then it can favor a diagnosis of VT. Suppose if the pattern is triphasic, then it favors SVT than VT. So, what is the treatment of ventricular tachycardia? So, if the patient is hemodynamically unstable, we can go for a synchronized electrical cardioversion. Suppose if the patient is hemodynamically stable, we need to know if the patient is having a preserved ejection fraction or a reduced ejection fraction. Suppose if the patient is having a preserved ejection fraction, we can go for amiodarone in the dose of 150 milligrams low IV in over 10 minutes, followed by a maintenance dose of 1 mg per kg per hour for 6 hours and 0.5 mg per kg per hour for 18 hours. The other drugs which we can prefer are procainamide. Although procainamide is only a class 2 indication compared to amiodarone, which is a class 1 indication, procainamide has more faster onset of action and is generally more preferred compared to amiodarone in treating VT. And the loading dose of amiodarone is to a maximum about 17 mg per kg and the maintenance dose is 1 to 4 milligram per minute. Suppose if the VT is associated with MI, we can go for lidocaine. Suppose if the patient is having a reduced ejection fraction, the preferred agents are amiodarone and lidocaine, and other antiarrhythmics cannot be used. Suppose if the patient is having SVT with aberrancy or an antidromic AVRT, AV nodal blocking agents are contraindicated for the same reason that it itself can precipitate ventricular fibrillation. Therefore, the preferred agents are only again 1A, 1C, and 3 antiarrhythmics, which are procainamide, ibutylide, and flecainide. Thank you.
That was a very good presentation, ma'am. So we'll deal with arrhythmias during ECG class. Okay, so we'll deal with palpitations alone. So palpitation basically undue awareness of one's own heartbeat due to either change in the rate, rhythm, or force of contraction. That is all. That is what I want you to remember finally. சரியா? So அதுக்கப்புறம் இந்த rate, rhythm, force of contractions இதை வச்சு சொல்லலாம். Because of rate, it could be tachyarrhythmias or bradyarrhythmias. Because of rhythm, either it could be, again you said all these arrhythmias, or due to force of contraction, which could be blocks, anything. So இது மூணு வச்சு தான் காசஸ் நமக்கு. சரியா? So அடுத்து, if the patient is complaining of palpitations, what will you do? Workup சொன்னீங்கல்ல, அந்த workupல என்னென்னலாம் பண்ணுவீங்க?
ECG எக்கோ எடுக்கலாம் சார். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ECGல ஏதாவது அரித்மியா இருக்கான்னு பார்க்கலாம். அப்புறம் எக்கோல ஏதாவது சக்ஷனல் ஹார்ட் டிசீஸ் இருக்கான்னு பார்க்கலாம் சார். அப்புறம் அதுவும் இல்லைன்னா ஏதாவது எலக்ட்ரோலைட் இம்பேலன்ஸ் ஆர் தைராய்டு அப்நார்மாலிட்டி அவர் எண்டோக்ரைன் காஸா தான் சார் இருக்கும்.
அதுக்கு முன்னாடி ஒண்ணு பார்க்கலாம். சிம்பிளான விஷயம். பேஷண்ட் படபடப்பா இருக்குன்னா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் நீ பல்ஸ் பார்க்கலாம்.
ஓகே சார்.
பல்ஸ் பாருங்க, அதுல இர்ரெகுலாரிட்டி இருக்கா, அதுக்கப்புறம் என்ன இர்ரெகுலாரிட்டின்றத பார்த்து இசிஜி பார்த்து கன்ஃபார்ம் பண்ணலாம். எனிதிங் குட் பி பிக்ட் அப் இன்க்ளூடிங் a VPC and everything. ஸோ பல்ஸ் அகைன் palpitation is a symptom. நீ பல்ஸ் பார்த்தனா அதுல என்ன இருக்கா இல்லையான்னு தெரிய வரும். சரியா? இப்போ if you are seeing a patient with the SVT ன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க, let's assume you are not able to appreciate the PVS in an ECG. What will you do?
ரெகுலரா இருந்தா அது SVT சார். பல்ஸ்.
Can AF be regular?
If it's associated with AV dissociation, it can be regular, sir.
Due to digital toxicity.
Digital toxicity.
Toxicity. AF can be regular. Okay. So we'll deal with the ECG classes later. So just now, important clinical points alone. So palpitation, again, if you're not able to appreciate the PV, what will you do then? ECG எடுத்து அனுப்புறாங்க, அதுல PV உனக்கு தெரியல, but rate is very fast. What will you do?
வேகல் மேனுவல்ல டெர்மினேட் ஆச்சுன்னா டெர்மினேட் ஆகுதான்னு பார்க்கலாம் சார்.
அதுக்கு நீ பேஷண்ட் முதல்ல ECG மானிட்டர்ல போடணும். சரியா? So patient
ECG ல ஸ்டாண்டர்டைசேஷன் டைம் டியூரேஷன்.
Correct. So ECG standardization time duration. Normal standardization time is 25 mm per second. சரியா? The patient is having tachycardia என்ன பண்ணணும் ஸ்பீட?
ஸ்பீட குறைக்கலாம் சார்.
ஸ்பீட ஏத்தணும். சரியா? tachycardiaக்கு ஸ்பீடோட பேப்பரோட ஸ்பீட ஏத்தணும். அப்பதான் ஹார்ட் ரேட்டோட பேப்பர் ஃபாஸ்டா போச்சுனா தான் அதுக்குள்ள இருக்க பரீடு PV QRS காம்ப்ளெக்ஸ் எல்லாம் வெளில வரும். சரியா? யூசுவலி ஸ்பீட குறைக்க மாட்டோம். நம்ம பிராடிகார்டியாஸ் யூசுவலா தெரிய வரும். ஸோ அதனால இந்த பேஷண்ட் யூசுவலி அதனால ECG மிஷின் பக்கத்துல போய் நோண்ட ஆரம்பிங்க. ECG மிஷின் பக்கத்துல போய் நோண்டிங்கன்னா நல்லாவே தெரியும். ஸோ 25 mm per second you change to 50 mm per second, all your complexes will get broadened. பட் அந்த ECG வச்சு you are not supposed to measure the segments, intervals, அதெல்லாம் நீ மெஷர் பண்ண முடியாது. So that is only to find out any buried waves or QRS complexes. அதுதான் நீ பண்ண முடியும். ஸோ இதுதான் ஒரு பேசிக்ஸ். ஓகேவா? So arrhythmias will deal with in detail. We'll ask the second years to take a class on arrhythmias. Okay? AF எல்லாம் நம்ம அப்ப டீல் பண்ணுவோம். So far so good. Very good presentation, ma. Praveen? Siri? See, anyone want to answer?
Hello. Okay, so this class was more of dealing in detail with arrhythmia, but to deal with palpitations alone, okay, adula konjam few things solana appadina. The first thing is, as you said, it is awareness of one's own heartbeat due to rate, rhythm and force of contraction, right? So basically enna inga nadakuduna, whatever changes there, yaar background noise varudilla. Okay, so whatever causes change in these actually causes a change in the relative motion of the heart with the chest wall. Okay, that is being perceived as a palpitation. Okay, so usually force of contraction gradnala movement change ஆகிறதுனால தான் you perceive it. எதனால அது தெரியுது, ஏன் வந்து normal heart rate அதெல்லாம் நம்மளுக்கு perceive ஆகலங்கிறதுக்கு there are no explanations actually. Okay, they say we have extracardiac and intracardiac sensory things which is sensing all these. So normala இருக்கிறது யூசுவலா perceive ஆகாது, mostly perceive ஆகாது, but abnormal things that changes in rate, rhythm and force of contraction, they usually get perceived as palpitation. So palpitation பார்க்கும்போது சுப்ரஜா சொன்ன மாதிரி like around 75%, அதாவது 3/4 of the palpitations are due to cardiac and psychiatric cause. Okay, so ரெண்டுமே ரொம்ப கேர்ஃபுல்லா பார்க்கணும். ஏன்னா cardiac causeனா you have to be extra careful, right? So cardiac cause நீங்க எடுத்தீங்க அப்படின்னா basically ரெண்டு simple things தான். You have either structural abnormality இல்ல ஒரு functional abnormality. By structural I mean patient can have valvular heart disease or congenital heart disease ல வர changesனால you can have palpitations. Or functional, mostly it is arrhythmia. Okay, that is the conduction things. Arrhythmia you can have brady, tachy, எல்லாம் டீடைல்டா பார்த்திருக்கீங்க. And one more important thing is pacemaker. இப்போ pacemaker வச்சிருக்கீங்க, pacemakerனால dysynchronous contraction of ventricles இல்ல pacemaker malfunction அதெல்லாம் வந்துச்சுன்னா you can again have palpitation. So history of pacemaker insertion should also be asked when dealing with a patient with palpitation. இது ஒண்ணு. நான் கார்டியாக் அப்படின்னு எடுத்துட்டீங்க அப்படின்னா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் திங் நம்மளுக்கு காமனா வருது அப்படின்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா சைக்காட்ரிக் வரும் ஆப்வியஸ்லி. பட் நம்ம ஓபிடிக்கு ஆஸ் அ டெர்மினல் நம்ம டெர்ஷரி ரெஃபரல் சென்டர்ல ஸோ நம்மளுக்கு வரதெல்லாம் பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஹைப்பர் கைனடிக் சர்க்குலேஷன்ல வரவங்க ரொம்ப அதிகம். எஸ்பெஷலி இந்த பேஷண்ட் இஸ் ஹேவிங் அனீமியா, இல்ல ஒரு தைரோடாக்சிகோசிஸ்ல, இல்ல ஒரு ஃபீவர் கேஸ். ஸோ இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிறது தான் ரொம்ப காமனா நம்மளுக்கு வரும். அது இல்லாம அரித்மோஜெனிக் கண்டிஷன்ஸ் சொல்லலாம். அரித்மோஜெனிக் கண்டிஷன்ஸ்ல தான் தைரோடாக்சிகோசிஸ், இல்ல இன்னொரு காமன் திங் வந்து ஹைப்போகிளைசிமியா. ஹைப்போகிளைசிமியா பத்தி சொன்னீங்களா? ஸோ ஹைப்போகிளைசிமியா ரொம்ப காமன். ஓகேவா? ஸோ பால்பிடேஷன்ஸ் வருது, ஸ்வெட்டிங் எல்லாமே இருக்கு அப்படின்னா ஹைப்போகிளைசிமியாவும் பார்க்கணும். நம்பர் 1. அடுத்தது ட்ரக்ஸ். ட்ரக்ஸ்ல என்ன சொன்னீங்கம்மா? இருக்கீங்களா?
சொல்லுங்க சார்.
யா drugsல what are the drugs you told?
Sympathomimetics, anticholinergics, vasodilators, any drug which cause physical dependence withdraw பண்ணா வரும் சார்.
ஓகே. நான் இன்னும் ரொம்ப காமனா பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஆல்கஹால், அதுக்கப்புறம்
கெஃபைன்.
ஓகே. ஸோ அது ரெண்டும் ரொம்ப காமனா இருக்கும் ட்ரக்ஸ் ரிலேட்டடா பாத்தீங்கன்னா. அப்புறம் மாஸ்டோசைட்டோசிஸ்ல ஏமா பால்பிடேஷன் வருது?
ஹிஸ்டமின் அதிகமா இருக்கனால தெரியல சார்.
Yeah, it is actually due to systemic mastocytosis. People are prone for releasing so many and the mediators or chemicals due to various stimuli. For drug intake, food intake, okay va, illa vera edavadhu insult edu vandalum there is periodic release of mediators. Okay va. So adanala ungalku patient can go in for hypotension illa tachycardia, okay, which is perceived as palpitation. So systemic mastocytosis liyum varala. Okay, so idella da basic etiology neenga paakuறது. அப்புறம் டியூரேஷன்ல நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா சொன்னீங்க, ஓகே டியூரேஷன்ல ரெண்டு தான், வந்துட்டு போயிருதா இல்ல பர்சிஸ்டண்டா இருந்துட்டே இருக்கா அப்படிங்கறத பாப்பீங்க, ரைட்? ஸோ இப்போ பர்சிஸ்டண்டா இருந்துட்டே இருக்கு அப்படின்னா டெஃபினெட்லி தேர் ஹாஸ் டு பி ஸ்ட்ரக்சரல் காஸ். ஓகேவா? ஸ்ட்ரக்சரல் காஸ் தான் ரொம்ப ரொம்ப காமன். அதுலயும் வேல்வுலர் ஹார்ட் டிசீஸ். அதுக்கு மேல பர்சிஸ்டண்டா இருக்கு அப்படின்னா நான் கார்டியாக் கண்டிஷன்ஸ் லைக் உங்களுக்கு அனீமியா, அந்த ஏவி ஃபிஸ்டுலா அதெல்லாம் இருக்கலாம். பேராக்சிஸ்மலா வருதுன்னா மோஸ்ட்லி கண்டக்ஷன் ப்ராப்ளம்ஸ், உங்களுக்கு அரித்மியாஸ் தான். ஓகேவா? அது இல்லாம நான் கார்டியாக் காஸ் which can occur paroxysmally என்ன? நான் கார்டியாக் conditions causing paroxysmal palpitations.
Pheochromocytoma.
Yeah, pheochromocytoma, again hypoglycemia. ஓகேவா? இதெல்லாம் இருக்கலாம். ஸோ பேசிக்லி இப்போ ஒரு பேஷண்ட் வராங்க, ராகவ் சொன்ன மாதிரி பேஷண்ட் ஓபிடிக்குன்னு இல்லை, நம்ம ஓகே எமர்ஜென்சி வார்டுக்கு வராங்க பால்பிடேஷன் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு, the first thing you see is பல்ஸ். பல்ஸ் பார்த்துட்டு நெக்ஸ்ட் என்ன பண்ணுவீங்க? டாக்கியாரித்மியா இருக்கு, நெக்ஸ்ட் what will you do? The next important things to be checked.
வைட்டல் ஸ்டேபிளா இருக்கான்னு பார்க்கணும் சார்.
அதுதான்மா ரொம்ப 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 இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் வந்து வைட்டல்ஸ் பார்க்கணும். ஓகேவா? வைட்டல்ஸ் அண்ட் சிபிஜி செக் பண்ணணும். ஓகே, நீங்க வந்திருக்கீங்க பால்பிடேஷன் டாக்கிகார்டியா இருக்கு, இசிஜி எடுக்கிறதுலே ரொம்ப கான்சென்ட்ரேட் பண்ணிட்டு பிபிஎம் மிஸ் பண்ணிடுவீங்க. ஓகே, பிகாஸ் மோஸ்ட் ஆஃப் த டாக்கியாரித்மியாஸ் நம்மளுக்கு பிரசன்ட் ஆகும்போது எஸ்விடி எல்லாம் பாத்தீங்கன்னா எஸ்விடி இஃப் இட் இஸ் மோர், ரேட் இஸ் மோர் அப்படின்னா டெஃபினெட்லி பேஷண்ட் கேன் கோ ஃபார் ஹீமோடைனமிக் டீகாம்பன்சேஷன். ஓகேவா? ஆர் ஏஎஃப் வித் ஆர்விஆர்ல வருவான். ஓகே, ஆல்ரெடி எம்எஸ் இருக்கும், அதுல ஏஎஃப் வித் ஆர்விஆர் வந்தா டெஃபினட்டா கார்டியாக் அவுட்புட் உங்களுக்கு கம்மியா தான் இருக்கும். ஓகே, ஸோ பிபி பார்க்க வேண்டியது ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டன்ட். அதுக்கப்புறம் யூ கேன் கோ ஃபார் கண்டினியூஸ் மானிட்டரிங் ஆஃப் த ஹார்ட் ரேட். இப்போ விடிஏ வராங்கன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க, ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பேஷண்ட் இதா இருக்கா, சிக்கா இருக்கு அப்படின்னா சுப்பைன் பொசிஷன்ல போடுங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் டூ சம்திங் டு இன்க்ரீஸ் த பிபி. உங்களுக்கு ஆப்வியஸ்லி விடினா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டெர்மினேட் பண்ணோம், பட் அதர் தேன் விடி உங்களுக்கு எஸ்விடிஸ் எல்லாம் இருந்துச்சு அப்படின்னா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வந்து ஹீமோடைனமிக் ஸ்டேட்டஸ் தான் ரொம்ப கான்சென்ட்ரேட் பண்ணணும். ஓகேவா? ஸோ இப்போ பேஷண்ட் வரும்போது உங்களுக்கு அரித்மியா தெரிஞ்சிருச்சு இசிஜியில் அப்படின்னா யூ ட்ரீட். அரித்மியாவே இல்லை அப்படின்னா இப்போ ஓபிடிக்கு ஒரு பேஷண்ட் பால்பிடேஷன் வரான், இசிஜி எடுக்கிறீங்க, அரித்மியாவே இல்லைன்னா என்னவா இருக்கலாம்?
அதுதான் சைக்காட்ரிக் காஸ் இல்ல அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கலாம் சார், இல்ல சைனஸ் டாக்கிகார்டியாவா இருக்கலாம்.
ஆக்சுவலா மோஸ்ட் காமன் அரித்மியா which cause palpitation என்ன?
சைனஸ் டாக்கிகார்டியா.
சைனஸ் டாக்கிகார்டியா இருந்தா உங்களுக்கு கண்டுபிடிச்சிடலாமே இசிஜில. நான் இசிஜில எந்த அரித்மியாவும் இல்லைன்னு. ரொம்ப ஒரு ஏசிம்டமேட்டிக் யங் இண்டிவிஜுவல் கம்மிங் வித் பால்பிட்டேஷன் என்ன இருக்கலாம்? நீங்க சொன்ன கேஸ் ஹிஸ்டரி தான். எம்விபி இருக்கலாம். எம்விபி ஓகே, எம்விபி அக்ரீடு ஓகேவா. பட் அதை விட ரொம்ப காமன் வந்து பிஏசி பிவிசி தான்.
ஓகே.
ஸோ பிஏசி பிவிசியில் நீங்கள் சொன்ன மாதிரி அந்த போஸ்ட் காம்பன்சேட்டரி பொட்டன்சியேஷன் வருது இல்லை, ஸோ அது மட்டும் அவன் வந்து பால்பிட்டேஷன் ஃபீல் பண்ணிட்டு வருவான். நீங்கள் எடுக்கிற அந்த 10 seconds ஆஃப் இசிஜியில் அது பிக்கப் ஆகாது. ஓகேவா. ஸோ அப்போதான் யூ கோ ஃபார் தேவைன்னா யூ கோ ஃபார் ஹோல்டர் மானிட்டரிங். அந்த 3 டைப்ஸ் ஆஃப் மானிட்டர்ஸ்லாம் இருக்கு. ஹோல்டர் மானிட்டர் போட்டிங்கன்னா உங்களுக்கு இன்னும் ஷார்ட் டேர்ம் மெஷர்மெண்ட் கண்டினியூஸாக மெஷர் பண்ணிட்டே இருக்கும். யூஸ்வலி 1 to 2 days போட்டு கண்டினியூஸாக இசிஜி பார்த்துக்கலாம். அதுக்கு மேலே பார்த்தீங்கன்னா இந்த லூப் ரெக்கார்டர்ஸ்லாம் போடுவோம். அது எக்ஸ்டர்னலி இம்ப்ளான்டபிள் 2 இருக்கு. ஓகே, எக்ஸ்டர்னலாக போட்டிங்க அப்படின்னா 1 month வரைக்கும் அதை ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணலாம். அது கண்டினியூஸ் ரெக்கார்டிங் கிடையாது. இன்னொரு இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் திங், பேஷண்ட் தான் வந்து அதை ஆக்டிவேட் பண்ணணும். இல்லை ப்ரோக்ராம் பண்ணிட்டு உங்களுக்கு ஒரு செட் ரேட்ஸ்க்கு மேலேயோ இல்லை கீழேயோ ஹார்ட் ரேட் போச்சுன்னா ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணுற மாதிரி வச்சுக்கலாம். ஓகேவா. அதுவே இம்ப்ளான்டபிள் போட்டிங்கன்னா இன்னும் ஈஸி. ஒரு சின்ன டிவைஸ் தான், சப்க்யூட்டேனியஸாக நீங்கள் இம்ப்ளான்ட் பண்ணிடுவீங்க. ஓகேவா. அதோட லைஃப் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா 2-3 years இருக்கும். ஓகே, கண்டினியூஸாக அது இதே மாதிரி ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணிகிட்டே இருக்கும். பேஷண்ட்டும் ஆக்டிவேட் பண்ணலாம், அட் த சேம் டைம் அதுவாகவும் ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணிக்கும். ஓகே, ஸோ இதெல்லாம் வச்சு கண்டுபிடிக்கலாம். இப்போ பிஎஸ்சி பிவிசியும் இல்லைன்னா அதர் காசஸ் நீங்கள் கண்டுபிடிக்கிறது தான் ஹிஸ்ட்ரி. ஒன்று சொன்னீங்க எஸ்விடி இருந்துச்சு அப்படின்னா பேஷண்ட் வில் ஹாவ் ஒரு ஸ்பெசிஃபிக் சிம்டம். என்ன சொன்னீங்க?
I mean paroxysmal onset and abruptா terminate ஆயிரும் சார்.
டெர்மினேட் ஆனதுக்கு ஒரு சிம்டம் சொன்னீங்க.
பாலியூரியா இருக்கும் சார்.
யா, patient will be having diuresis. Okay, due to என்ன சொன்னீங்க?
ஏட்ரியல் ஸ்ட்ரெச்னால ANP வரும்.
யா, ANP இன்க்ரீஸ் ஆகும். அட் த சேம் டைம் ஆன்டிடயோட்டிக் ஹார்மோன் டிக்ரீஸ் ஆகும். ஓகேவா. ஸோ 2 நாளையும் உங்களுக்கு வந்து டயூரிசிஸ் வரும். பட் இது இல்லாம பேஷண்ட் கேன் ஆல்சோ பிரசன்ட் வித் ஜஸ்ட் நெக் வெயின் பல்சேஷன்ஸ். ஓகே, உங்களுக்கு பால்பிட்டேஷன் கூட தெரியாது. நிறைய பேஷண்ட் பாத்தீங்கன்னா வெறும் நெக் வெயின் நல்லா துடிக்குது சார் இங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு வருவாங்க. ஓகே, ஒன்லி நெக் வெயின் பல்சேஷன்ஸ். ஏன் அப்படின்னா ரொம்ப ஃபாஸ்டா உங்களுக்கு ஹார்ட் ரேட் போகும்போது உங்களுக்கு எஸ்விடில வென்ட்ரிகிள்ஸ் அண்ட் ஏட்ரியம் will almost be contracting at the same time. Almost, not at the same time exactly, but almost. அப்படின்னா மோஸ்ட் ஆஃப் டைம் ஏட்ரியம் கண்ட்ராக்ட் ஆகும்போது உங்களுக்கு மைட்ரல் வால்வ் வந்து எய்தர் க்ளோஸ்டா இருக்கும் இல்ல செமி க்ளோஸ்டா இருக்கும். ஓகே, மைட்ரல் அண்ட் ட்ரைகஸ்பிட் as well. ஓகே, ஸோ உங்களுக்கு ட்ரைகஸ்பிட் வால்வ் வந்து செமி க்ளோஸ்டா இருக்கும்போது உங்களுக்கு ஏட்ரியம் கண்ட்ராக்ட் ஆச்சுன்னா இட் will be seen as என்ன?
கேனான் ஏ வேவ்ஸ்.
ஸோ ஏ வேவ்ஸ். ஸோ அதுதான் உங்களுக்கு நெக் வெயின் பல்சேஷன்ஸாக வரலாம். ஓகேவா. ஸோ அது இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் திங். நெக் வெயின் பல்சேஷன் இருக்கா அப்படிங்கிற கேட்கணும். ஏன்னா நிறைய பேர் எப்படி வருவாங்கன்னா அந்த நெக்ல ஏதோ ஒரு டிஸ்கம்ஃபர்ட் இருக்கு, கண்ணாடி முன்னாடி போய் பார்த்தா துடிக்கும் பயங்கரமா. இட் வில் பி தேர் ஃபார் ஒரு 5 minutes. அதனால தான் பேஷண்ட் ப்ரெசென்ட்டே ஆகலாம். ஓகேவா. ஸோ அது ஒரு இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் திங் ஞாபகம் வச்சுக்கணும். அண்ட் இதுல நீங்க ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டண்டா ரொம்ப சீரியஸா கண்டுபிடிக்க வேண்டிய ஒரு விஷயம் என்ன? ஒரு இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் ஆரித்மியா நீங்க பிக்கப் பண்ண வேண்டியது. பால்பிட்டேஷனோட ப்ரெசென்ட் ஆகுறாங்க, ஒரு யங் பேஷண்ட், ஃபேமிலி ஹிஸ்டரி ஆஃப் சடன் கார்டியாக் டெத் இருக்கு. வென்ட்ரிகுலர் ஃபிப்ரிலேஷன் கண்டுபிடிக்கணும். நான் வென்ட்ரிகுலர் ஃபிப்ரிலேஷன்ல இருக்க பேஷண்ட் இல்ல, இசிஜி எடுக்கல, இப்போ பால்பிட்டேஷன் இல்ல. என்ன?
புர்காடா சிண்ட்ரோம் சார்.
புர்காடா எடுக்கலாம். இன்னொன்று அதை விட இன்னும் இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் அரித்மியா ரிலேட்டடா நீங்க பாத்தீங்க அப்படின்னா லாங் QT சிண்ட்ரோம்ஸ். ஸோ லாங் QT இன்டர்வல் இருக்கா அப்படிங்கிறத பார்க்கணும். ஏன்னா லாங் QT இன்டர்வல் நீங்க வந்து சிம்பத்தட்டிக் ஆக்டிவேஷன் அதிகமாச்சுன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க, RNT ஃபினாமினன் வந்து பேஷண்ட் வில் கோ ஃபார் அரித்மியா. ஓகேவா. ஸோ அதனால லாங் QT இருந்துச்சுன்னா டெஃபினட்டா பேஷண்ட் ஹஸ் டு பி ட்ரீட்டட். இன்ட்ராகார்டியாக் டிஃபிப்ரிலேட்டர் வச்சு ட்ரீட் பண்ண வேண்டியது இருக்கும். ஸோ லாங் QT இருக்கா அப்படிங்கிறதையும் பார்க்கணும். ஃபேமிலி ஹிஸ்டரி அதுல ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டன்ட். ஃபேமிலி ஹிஸ்டரி ஆஃப் சடன் டெத் இருக்கா அப்படிங்கிறத கேட்கணும். ஓகேவா. அப்புறம் இப்போ பேஷண்ட் வீசிங்கோட வரான். ஓகேவா, ஒரு பால்பிட்டேஷன் அண்ட் வீசிங்கோட வரான். ஓகே, நோன் ஸ்மோக்கர், கிரானிக் ஸ்மோக்கர். ஓகே, அவனுக்கு என்ன
மல்டிஃபோக்கல் ஏட்ரியல் டாக்கிகார்டியா காமன் சார், COPD பேஷண்ட் சார்.
ஸோ மேட் இருக்கலாம், அரித்மியா ரிலேட்டடா மேட் இருக்கலாம். பட் ஆப்வியஸ்லி COPD கேன் ஹேவ் கார்பல்மனல் அண்ட் அதர் ரிலேட்டட் திங்ஸ் ஆல்சோ. ஓகே, ஸோ பட் மேட் வந்து வெரி வெரி காமன் இன் சிஓபிடி பேஷண்ட்ஸ், அதையும் நீங்கள் ஞாபகம் வச்சுக்கணும். ஓகே, அவ்வளோதான் என்னோட இன்புட்ஸ், அவ்வளோதான். வேற எனிஒன் எல்ஸ்? ராகவ், ஸ்ரீஹரி, பர்மியோ அன்னைக்கு இல்லை போல. எனிஒன் எல்ஸ் செகண்ட் இயர்ஸ்?
Satish.
Sir. Sir, elaborate discussion. Fine, sir. நிறைய கவர் பண்ணிருந்தாங்க.
சரி, அடுத்த பேசிஜ்ல பாத்துக்கலாம்.
Yes, sir.
சரி, okay, we'll sign out then.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Bye.